An elderly man entered the courtroom in handcuffs. His gaunt face was lowered. "Name?" asked the clerk. He answered in a trembling voice. "Mason Quinn, Sergeant, United States Marine Corps." No one expected what happened next. A few minutes later, as the female judge was reviewing his case, she suddenly froze. Her face turned pale. That name belonged to the man who had saved her brother's life on the battlefield in Fallujah before making the ultimate sacrifice. If you believe that honor does not fade just because we become poor or old, write respect. Mason Quinn, 69 years old, sat on the bench in the courtroom. His shoulders slumped under a worn military jacket that was 2 sizes too big. The harsh fluorescent light emphasized the deep wrinkles carved by time and hardship on his once proud face. Decades ago, he stood straight in his dress uniform. Medals glittered on his chest. Today, he awaited sentencing in clothes taken from a charity basket at a shelter. The bailiff called his case number, 47B, City versus Mason Quinn. Disorderly conduct, trespassing, resisting arrest. Mason slowly stepped forward. His movements were stiff from arthritis and old injuries that never healed properly. First Vietnam, then Iraq, his second tour. The wounds, visible and invisible, he carried silently through the decades. "Mr. Quinn," began the prosecutor, a young man with perfect teeth in a tailored suit, "you were repeatedly warned about loitering behind the cafe on Jefferson Street. The owner filed 3 complaints just this month." The prosecutor didn't mention that Mason was just sitting quietly near the cafe's dumpster, warming himself by the kitchen's vent pipe on a particularly cold night. He never begged, never bothered customers, just sought a moment of warmth when the December temperatures dropped below freezing. Officer James Reynolds, who made the arrest, testified, found the defendant behind the cafe at 11:45 p.m. He refused to leave the premises when instructed. Mason hadn't refused. He had simply asked for 5 more minutes to finish the half sandwich the cook had secretly given him, but arguing seemed pointless then, and seemed pointless now. "Your Honor," the prosecutor continued, "this is the defendant's 3rd citation this year. We recommend community service and a 30-day ban from the downtown business district. The ban would mean being barred from the shelter on 4th Street, the only warm bed Mason had known in months. It would mean missing meals at St. Luke's Church on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It would mean true isolation in the coldest part of winter." "Mr. Quinn," addressed Judge Olivia Parker, "do you have an attorney today?" Mason shook his head. His assigned public defender had been called to another courtroom for an emergency hearing. "Would you like to make a statement on your own behalf?" the judge asked, peering over her half-moon glasses. Mason cleared his throat. His voice was hoarse from long silence. "No excuses, Your Honor. I was just trying to get warm." "Why that particular place?" the judge pressed, something unreadable flickering across her face. "The cook," Mason hesitated. "Jimmy. Sometimes leaves food out. He's known me since we were kids. My father served with his in Desert Storm." "Your military service?" asked Judge Parker, though it was usually irrelevant in such cases. "United States Marine Corps, 1975 to 1995. Staff Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, in Iraq." The words came out automatically. A moment of clarity and pride amidst the confusion. The judge made a note and continued reviewing the file. Something in Mason's record caught her attention. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened. A substantial man in an expensive suit entered and approached the defense table. He set down a leather briefcase and addressed the court. "Your Honor, Alexander Rossi. I am representing the defendant. My apologies for the interruption, but I've been retained for Mr. Quinn's defense." Mason looked up, bewildered. He hadn't called anyone, couldn't afford a lawyer, certainly not one with a suit like that. "This is highly unusual, Mr. Rossi," noted Judge Parker. "The court was not informed of your representation." "A very recent development, Your Honor," Rossi replied calmly. "I request a brief recess to confer with my client." The judge studied the lawyer, then Mason. Her expression was inscrutable. "Court is in recess for 15 minutes, she said, and swiftly exited to her chambers. Mason turned to the stranger beside him. "I don't have money for a lawyer." "You don't need any," Rossi said quietly. "The firm Williams, Rossi & Parker is taking your case pro bono." Mason frowned at the familiar name. "Parker? Like the judge?" "Precisely," confirmed Rossi. In her chambers, Judge Olivia Parker removed her glasses with trembling hands. 20 years on the bench had taught her composure, but nothing prepared her for this. "It can't be the same man," she whispered, though the details matched too perfectly. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a worn photograph. A young woman next to her brother, Lieutenant Jack Parker, in marine dress blues. His hand was on her shoulder. Both were smiling broadly at his officer commissioning ceremony. Next to it lay Jack's last letter from Iraq. The paper was thin from repeated readings. In it he described a firefight outside Fallujah, where their unit was pinned down. "If it weren't for Staff Sergeant Quinn," Jack wrote, "none of us would have made it out. He ran across open ground under heavy fire to reach a downed Marine, then provided covering fire so we could evacuate the wounded. 2 weeks after writing that letter, Jack was killed by an IED blast." Olivia remembered the military funeral, the folded flag presented to her parents, and the Marine who approached them afterward. "Your son saved my life," he'd said. He was the one Jack had pulled from the fire. That Marine's name was Mason Quinn. Olivia had tried to contact him after the funeral, wanting to know more about her brother's final days. But the military explained that Sergeant Quinn had been immediately reassigned. Later, she learned he was honorably discharged after severe PTSD and a traumatic brain injury from his final tour. And now, 20 years later, he sat in her courtroom, homeless, alone, and unrecognized. A knock came at the door. Alexander Rossi entered with a concerned expression. "Olivia, what's going?" As her late husband's former law partner and a family friend, he was one of the few who used her first name. "It's him, Alex," she said, pointing to the photograph. "The Marine who saved Jack. The one who pulled him to safety after he was hit." Rossi's eyes widened as he grasped the full picture. "The homeless veteran in your courtroom is Mason Quinn? The one you searched for all those years?" Olivia nodded. "His service record confirms it. Fallujah, 2004. Same battalion as Jack. Awarded the Silver Star for the actions Jack described in his letters." She paused. "Does he know who I am?" "I don't think so," she replied. "I married Thomas after law school, took the name Parker. It's been 20 years. She paused, collecting her thoughts. "What happened to him, Alex? How does a decorated Marine end up homeless in my courtroom, trying to get warm?" Rossi shook his head. "From what I gathered in our short communication, he suffers from severe PTSD. After his last tour, his wife left while he was deployed. His veteran benefits got tangled in bureaucracy. He worked construction for years until his service-related injuries made physical labor impossible. Then came job loss, home loss, and eventually the streets." She closed her eyes, remembering her brother's words. "Quinn's the best of us. The kind who'd give everything for his Marines without a second thought. If I can be half the officer he is as an NCO, I'll consider myself a success. What are you going to do, Olivia? Rossi asked softly. You can't preside over this case. No, Olivia said firmly, but I won't let him slip away again. You know the ethical considerations here. I'm well aware. But there are also ethical considerations in how we treat those who sacrificed everything for this country, she said, straightening up, her judicial dignity returning. When Judge Parker returned to the courtroom, her posture was impeccable, her expression neutral. But those who knew her well might have noticed a slight tremor in her hands as she arranged her papers. Mr. Rossi, has your client decided how he wishes to proceed? She asked formally. The attorney stood. Your Honor, we move to dismiss all charges. My client was merely seeking shelter from dangerously cold conditions, a basic human need. Furthermore, we can demonstrate that Mr. Quinn had the tacit permission of restaurant staff to be on the property. The prosecutor began to object, but Judge Parker slightly raised a hand, silencing him. I have some questions for the defendant, she ruled, turning her attention to Mason. Mason Quinn, your military record indicates involvement in Fallujah in 2004, correct? Mason straightened slightly, muscle memory from decades of service momentarily overcoming his current state. Yes, Your Honor, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. And on April 17th, 2004, you participated in an operation on the western outskirts of the city? A look of confusion crossed Mason's face. Yes, ma'am. We were escorting a convoy when we took heavy fire. During that engagement, you saved a wounded Marine, Lieutenant Jack Parker, under enemy fire. The courtroom fell silent. Mason's eyes narrowed, memories clearly flooding back. Lieutenant Parker, he repeated slowly. Yes, young officer, good man. He was hit trying to reach a wounded corpsman. Mason's eyes grew distant. I got to him, dragged him behind a wall. He kept telling me to leave him, save the others. From the gallery, a silver-haired man in a Marine Corps League jacket leaned forward, suddenly focused. And what happened to Lieutenant Parker? Judge Olivia Parker asked firmly, maintaining her professional mask despite the storm inside. We got him to a medevac, Mason replied, his voice dropping. Later, heard he made it to Germany, was back on patrol a few weeks later, but his vehicle hit an IED. Mason's voice wavered slightly. All these years I wondered if I did more harm than good pulling him out, if he just died later. The silver-haired Marine in the gallery stood, unable to contain himself. It's him, he declared loudly. That's Staff Sergeant Quinn. I was there that day. He saved 6 of us. Judge Parker rapped her gavel sharply. Order, she commanded, though her voice was less forceful than usual. The courtroom quieted. Tension hung in the air. Mason Quinn stared at the floor, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. The silver-haired Marine remained standing, defiant. Your Honor, the prosecutor interjected, while Mr. Quinn's military service is commendable, it's not relevant to this case. The court disagrees, Judge Parker interrupted. It is entirely relevant. She carefully set down her gavel. Court is in recess for 10 minutes. Bailiff, ensure Mr. Quinn remains in the courtroom. Rising, she stopped and, for the first time, made direct, unguarded eye contact with the defendant. Mr. Quinn, when I return, we have matters to discuss that extend beyond these charges. In her chambers, Olivia's professional composure broke again. With trembling fingers, she pressed her hands to her mouth, suppressing emotions held back for 20 years. Taking several deep breaths, she picked up the phone. "Colonel Matthews," she said. "Olivia Parker. Yes, I know it's been years. Listen, I need a favor, and I need it immediately." Exactly 10 minutes later, Judge Parker returned to the courtroom, not alone. Behind her walked 3 Marines in dress uniforms, a full colonel, a master sergeant, and a corporal carrying a polished wooden case. The courtroom buzzed. Whispers swept through the gallery. Mason Quinn stood automatically at the sight of the uniforms. Muscle memory was overpowering physical discomfort. Judge Parker sat and, for the first time in her judicial career, removed her glasses, setting them aside to address the room not as a judge, but as a person. "Before we proceed, I must disclose a personal connection to this matter," she began. "The Lieutenant Jack Parker the defendant spoke of was my brother." A wave of whispers rose in the room. Mason's eyes widened. Recognition and confusion warred on his face. 20 years ago, my brother wrote to our family about a staff sergeant who saved his life in Fallujah. A man who, under enemy fire, ran to him after he was wounded and provided covering fire so others could reach safety. Her voice remained remarkably even. That man was Staff Sergeant Mason Quinn. The silver-haired Marine in the gallery exclaimed, "It's true, Your Honor. I was there. Quinn took 2 rounds pulling the lieutenant to cover." Judge Parker nodded in acknowledgement. 2 weeks after that incident, my brother was killed in action. At his funeral, several Marines approached our family to share stories of Jack's bravery, but also to tell us about the staff sergeant who had saved him in that firefight, giving our family 2 more weeks with Jack that we otherwise would not have had. She looked directly at Mason. "After my brother's death, I tried to find you, Sergeant Quinn. The Marine Corps informed me you had been immediately reassigned. Years later, I was told you were discharged but couldn't locate you." She paused. "I never stopped looking. And now, by what one might call fate or divine intervention, you have appeared in my courtroom." She gestured to the colonel, who stepped forward. "Colonel James Matthews was my brother's commanding officer. He has something to say." Colonel Matthews approached the bench. "Staff Sergeant Quinn, the Marine Corps has been trying to locate you for several years. Your case was among thousands flagged for review under the Veteran Case Review Initiative. New information about your service in Iraq and Afghanistan has come to light, requiring a reassessment of your awards and benefit status." The corporal stepped forward, opening the wooden case. Inside, a medal gleamed on a blue ribbon. "By order of the Secretary of the Navy, and in recognition of conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action on April 17, 2004, the United States Navy. Cross is hereby presented to Staff Sergeant Mason J. Quinn, United States Marine Corps." A shocked whisper ran through the courtroom. The Navy Cross, the second highest award for valor, just below the Medal of Honor. "Recently declassified information confirmed that your actions that day not only saved Lieutenant Parker and 5 other Marines, but also disrupted an ambush that would likely have destroyed the entire convoy," Colonel Matthews explained. Mason's usually stoic expression finally cracked. "There's a mistake," he rasped. "I was just doing my job." "No mistake, Sergeant," the colonel confirmed. From the gallery came a voice. "Attention on deck." The silver-haired Marine and several others with military bearing, recognizable even in civilian clothes, rose, and one by one saluted Mason Quinn. And gradually everyone in the room stood. Even the prosecutor, torn between protocol and human respect, rose with evident reverence. Judge Parker, tears now freely flowing down her cheeks, addressed the room, her voice unsteady. "In light of these circumstances, all charges against Staff Sergeant Mason Quinn are dismissed with prejudice." She brought down her gavel with a decisive crack. "This court is adjourned." After the formalities, the master sergeant approached Mason with a tablet. "Sir, we've been trying to locate you to process the revised benefits package. Your disability rating has been reviewed and set at 100%, service-connected, retroactive to your discharge date." "What does that mean?" Mason asked, still stunned. "It means a significant back pay sum, sir, plus full medical coverage, a housing allowance, and educational benefits if you wish to use them." Alexander Rossi stepped forward. "Our firm will ensure immediate processing of all this. Mr. Quinn, no more bureaucratic delays." From the back of the room, Jimmy, the cook who had left food for Mason, approached with tears in his eyes. "My father always talked about a Marine who saved his whole squad. He said, if I ever meet Mason Quinn, I owe him everything." He extended a hand. "Never thought it was you all along." The prosecutor, visibly moved, also approached Mason. "Sir, I didn't know. Please accept my apologies for how this case was handled." Mason stood amidst the sudden attention. Dignity gradually returned to his posture, as if a weight of undeserved oblivion had fallen from his shoulders. Judge Parker descended from the bench, abandoning professional distance. She stopped before Mason. Her voice was soft but clear. "My brother told me something you said to him when you pulled him to safety. You said, 'No Marine gets left behind while I'm still breathing.' Today, Sergeant Quinn, we are finally fulfilling that same promise for you." 2 weeks later, Mason Quinn stood before a mirror in an apartment he still couldn't believe was his. A veteran housing program had fast-tracked his case, providing him with a one-bedroom in a complex specifically for formerly homeless veterans. The walls were bare, except for one framed item, his newly awarded Navy Cross in a display case next to his original Purple Hearts and Service Medals, which Alexander Rossi had somehow recovered from a storage unit auction years prior. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Judge Olivia Parker stood in the hallway without her judicial robe, holding a small box. "May I come in, Sergeant Quinn?" she asked. Mason let her in, still unaccustomed to the sudden changes in his life. "Just Mason is fine," he said. "Then it's just Olivia," she replied with a small smile. "At least outside the courtroom." They sat in the small living room. The awkwardness of their unique connection hung between them. "I brought something I thought you might want to see," Olivia said, opening the box and pulling out a bundle of letters. "These are from Jack. He wrote home every week he was deployed." She handed one letter to Mason. "This one mentions you specifically. It was written the day after you saved him." Mason's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. Lieutenant Parker's handwriting was neat and precise, as he remembered from field reports. "Mom and Dad," he read aloud, "don't worry about the news. I'm safe thanks to one of my NCOs, Staff Sergeant Quinn. He did something yesterday I still can't believe. When our unit was hit, he moved through fire that should have killed anyone. He wouldn't leave me, even when I ordered him to. He said, 'No Marine gets left behind while I'm still breathing.'" Mason's voice broke. He wrote that?" "He often wrote about you," Olivia said quietly. "He said you were the Marine he aspired to be." "He was a good officer," Mason replied. "Young, but he cared for his men. That's rare." "After we lost Jack, I went to law school," Olivia said, gesturing around the apartment. "This veteran court housing program, I started the housing initiative. It all started because Jack wrote about you, about how the system sometimes fails, even its heroes." Mason looked away, uncomfortable with such gratitude. "I'm no hero. just did what needed doing. That's what all the heroes say, Olivia replied softly. There's something else I need to tell you. On the day Jack died, he was leading a patrol to find an insurgent cell targeting civilians. He volunteered for that mission. She took a breath. In his last letter home, he wrote that he was trying to live up to the example you set. This revelation hit Mason harder than any physical wound. For 20 years, he had carried the survivor's guilt, wondering if he had only prolonged the inevitable, doubting if his efforts were futile in the chaos of war. He didn't die because of you, Olivia said, as if reading his thoughts. He lived as he did because of you. They sat in silence, two people connected by loss and honor across decades. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the city in quiet white. Finally, Mason spoke, his voice barely a whisper. All those years on the street, I thought no one remembered, that none of it mattered in the end. But it meant everything, Olivia assured him. It meant everything to Jack, to those other Marines, to me. Preparing to leave, she gently placed a hand on Mason's shoulder. Jack always said the measure of a Marine isn't what he does when everyone is watching, but what he does when no one is looking. You lived that truth, even when the world looked away. Mason straightened taller than he had in years. A silent pride returned to his posture. Someone remembered my name, he said simply. After all this time, someone remembered. In that quiet moment, something long broken began to heal. Not just for Mason Quinn, but for all touched by his unnoticed honor. Some people save others from death, but spend their whole lives without anyone saving them from oblivion. Honor doesn't require fame. Sometimes one moment of recognition is enough to help a person stand up from the ground with their head held high. I don't want anyone to be left behind. Everyone deserves to be heard and respected. If you believe this too, write respect to show you stand for kindness and justice. Don't forget to follow, subscribe to the channel to spread more stories that touch hearts.